So it says this. Does somebody else want to read it? I've talked quite a lot. Somebody want to read it? Verse 37 to 42.
When Jesus had finished speaking, the Pharisee invited him to eat with him. So he went in and reclined at the table. But the Pharisee, noticing that Jesus did not first wash before the meal, was surprised. And the Lord said to him, "Now then, you Pharisees, clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside you're full of greed and wickedness. You foolish people, did not the one who made the outside make the inside also? But give what is inside the dish to the poor, and everything will be clean for you. Woe to you, Pharisees, because you give God a tenth of your mint, rue and all other kinds of garden herbs, but you neglect justice and the love of God. You should have practiced the latter without leaving the former undone."
Brilliant. Jesus is just brilliant. I love it when he does this and he challenges in this way. You clean the outside of your cup, but you don't clean the inside. Jesus is saying it's what's inside that's important. It's the spirit of the law, not the letter of the law. And I love that verse that says, it says, but give what is inside the dish to the poor, and everything will be clean for you. Holiness is about giving to the poor. Then he says, woe to you Pharisees, because he's talking about all the things that they do that is right. But then he says, but you neglect justice and the love of God. And I think what's happened is, my alarm, I have 2 minutes left. What's happened is, we've neglected justice and love, and we've taken up these other things. And I think what we need to do is we need to find a right balance again. We need to remember what it is to be holy, and remember what it means to be different in the way that Jesus was different. Jesus' difference and his holiness was to do with being involved, and was to do with loving his enemies, was to do with loving the poor, was to do with justice. And I'll finish just with a couple of stories. One of the things that Oasis does is it works with the trafficked and the traffickers. And I know some of you at the prayer meeting this morning probably saw that DVD, and I know that Anita from Oasis is coming later and talk a bit about trafficking. Did you know 1,000 children went missing from Bangalore in the last 6 months? That's crazy. It's happening right under our noses. And one of the things we do is we do like raids. So we go and Oasis goes to a brothel, and they'll take these women out of the situation that they're in. And I had I was going to say privilege, but it was absolutely frightening. I had the privilege, but also the fright of my life when they asked me if I would come along and be like an undercover, like go and help and be a part of one of these raids. So I had to go, and I had to meet some pimps. And I tell you, these guys, they are nasty guys, really nasty guys. And what they did is I had to go to them and I had to say, I want to buy a woman, will you show me a woman? We were looking for girls that were underage, so we had to ask to see underage girls. And the first time we went, we just did it on the side of the road, and they came along, and I tell you, I was so scared. I was so scared. And they brought this girl out of the car. They don't do it where they're at, because if they do it where they're at, then you know where they are. And they're really worried about being followed and those kind of things. So we just stood outside of a cafe coffee day actually, and they just take this girl past you and they let you see her. And then they say, you say whether you want her or not. And I just looked into her eyes, and I was just desperately praying for her, she just looked so depressed, so imprisoned. And the second time was even worse. I went again outside of a cafe coffee day, and I had to go and look at a girl, and there's about 3 guys, and they made me get into a car that had all of its windows blacked out, and I had to get inside this car, and they take you around the block. And again, this girl was just sat there in the corner of this car, and her eyes were just black with depression. And again I just thought, God, how can this be? How can this happen? And I got out of the car and I was talking with one of the guys from Oasis, and he is incredible. He says, my faith comes alive when I do things like this, he said, because I know that it's when I do this that I'm doing what I was created for. This guy's putting his life in danger, day in, day out, week in, week out. He's going on raids. Sometimes they have to lock themselves in rooms with girls and phone the police and wait for them to come. They do some of the most incredibly dangerous things. They're hanging out with people that they should never be hanging out with. They're hanging out with the sinners. They're hanging out with prostitutes. They're hanging out with people, that sometimes we think we should be nowhere near. And yet for Anil, this is the place for him. This is the place, actually, where he finds he is holy, as Christ is holy. What does it mean for us to be holy?